Hello, once again, patriots and activist wannabes, to another episode of Warn 2024. Because after all, we are only 8.5, almost not even that, months away from an election that could change all of our lives. This is Cathi Chamberlain, your host. And I have a very, very interesting guest to bring to you today. This gentleman is just amazing. I still can't get over it. I was doing some research on his work in the last couple of days, and it just goes on and on and on. I don't know how he finds time to do anything else. And when you meet him, I think that you'll understand. Let me bring on here our guest, Cory Endrulat. Cory, thank you so much for taking. I can't believe you can spare the time to be with me. How are you?
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's all about allocation, right? And priority. I care about this generation and what's happening in the world. And so I spend quite literally all my hours pretty much dedicated to this cause. A lot of it is writing and journaling and reflecting. And I don't claim to be right. I am asking questions. I'm trying to seek the bigger picture. I'm a truth seeker, right? And so I connect with everybody, anybody who cares about freedom, anybody who wants to take action as well. That's a whole separate conversation. Is like, what is it that we need to look at? And then also, how do we bring that to the masses? So
Okay,
I
so
dedicate my work to both.
yeah, let me stop you there because I don't know what you're on, but I need some of it. And so what I'm going to do is allow you to have the floor here and explain to our audience, because so many of them just, they know something has to be done. They just
Mhm.
don't know what to do, how to get into it. Why don't you start us off here with how you got into it to begin with, and what was the driving force?
I would say that's essential. Yes, because our upbringing plays a big toll on how we achieve our own understanding in the world. And many people, if you ask them, how did they find out, the importance of liberty and freedom and taking charge of their own life and getting out of the systems that be, whether that be mentally or physically, and mentally usually leads to the physical part of it. There's usually some sort of awakening that happens, whether it's 9/11 or the 2008 banking crash, or it was COVID, for instance, that was lately. And there's always those events that happen in people's lives. Some people have a spiritual moment later in life. When they're 50, they're 60 years old, they realize maybe they were a veteran and they had some trauma that resurfaces. And, you call that shadow work from Carl Jung. There's many things that can arise in people where they say, wait, things are not what I thought they were. And what I was taught was not actually true. So I wouldn't be the only one when I say that I've had those experiences. I did not come to it, though, through an experience that involved hurt and shame. More so, I actually asked a lot of questions and I did a lot of journaling. And I did that for many weeks. But I guess I should give some context as to that. Um, I started with nutrition and researching ingredients. And when I was looking at ingredient lists, when I would go through the store, and I was about 13 years old, I used the internet to my advantage as a tool to look up these ingredients. From there, I was learning this whole language of ingredients that nobody is taught in the school and how they're causing cancers and all sorts of things. And I'm like, why aren't we being taught this? And I was being led to websites where they were questioning much more than just ingredients. Websites like Food Babe, I thought were like one of the first ones I would come across. And then I'd come across like websites like Natural News pretty often. And now I actually got interviewed by Mike Adams. That's to my surprise. I didn't expect that. But now it's because I'm producing content like them. I'm less of the consumer and more of the producer. But that's the thing. I basically went from a childlike state of developing my mind and being in dependence to my family and to others, to achieving more independence of my own mind, of my own body. I started to work out. I started to cook for myself. I started to experiment with ideas and started to think more about the reality around me. That led me taking a nutrition course and then kind of going down that path to 2016, where I saw Trump and his energy that basically drove me in to the political realm. I was very new to politics. I've always held a message my whole life called "Nature is the answer." Through a lot of my journals, I'm a very nature-seeking, connected person. I grew up in the mountains of Northeast Pennsylvania. I came down to Florida about a year ago. That's where I met Cathi. And so, ever since then, I've just been crazy doing activism every single day, basically. And so I welcome anybody else who wants to do the same and they want help doing so. But basically, that nature connection allowed me to foster in like what is morals, right? And what are we losing as humanity as we move into the age of AI and technology and we pump ourselves full of different vaccines and chemicals every single day? We don't realize what we may be doing to ourselves. The same thing happens mentally and politically. And I saw this in 2016. You saw that with the rise of feminism and social justice warriors and people imposing their wills on others and people claiming that they're virtuous and that they're the victim, right? And you saw so much tension like that. And the energy that I saw from Trump really brought in my generation. I saw a lot of people who were my age who fell into that energy. And I even went to a lot of his political rallies. I have his water bottle, his t-shirt. I still have a lot of that actually. And my dad even claimed to work for him. So I really knew Trump inside and out. I even worked with a channel called Niski TV, which is not there anymore on YouTube, but you can still find his channel. And he actually produced a lot of the videos that the Trump campaign uses now, although they don't give him credit. They used his videos as well in 2016. I actually helped produce some of those videos, and they each had, I'm sure, millions of views. At the time, they had hundreds of thousands. By now, it's millions because of how much the campaign has reused them. And we were actually going to set up a website for populism. At the time, populism was not a popular word. Now I see a bunch of people using the word populism. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's where I was in 2016. But that was when, again, I was new to politics and I was seeing things and I was seeing different patterns in human behavior. But seeing that I'm a nature seeking person and I look toward the psychology and morality of things, I wasn't going to stop just right there. A channel named High Impact Flicks, his actual name is Brian Young, had many videos. His top videos were questioning 9/11. They each had about like 10 million views each. You can't find them on the internet anymore, of course. Many of his videos. I would consider him like a school teacher. I mean, really, the depth and the detail of his older videos. Now he's got like 5 different channels. The guy's like he's like a army. Talk about me. You think I do a lot of work? This guy's crazy. He's really good at it. And he just put out a basic video with questions. So I was conservative, super constitutional, like I had every single argument to defend Trump. I was like, the left is evil. And I see a lot of people in that position now. And I'm not to say that I have a moral high ground for evolving past that, but I'm to say that I am simply a truth seeker and I saw contradictions in my own thinking that I did not see. And it took me about a week of crying and introspection to get past it. And that's because of my own childhood programming, which I would say it was perhaps easier for me to get out of because I'm a younger person. I'm 23. Cathi wanted me to maybe mention that because it's kind of like a feat. Sure, if you say so. But I could imagine somebody who goes 20, 30 years, 40 years of their life into that indoctrinated belief that it would be much harder for them to get out of that, especially if they've been politically active their whole life. Surely would not expect someone like Ben Shapiro or someone who's very politically active to all of a sudden say, oh, all my beliefs I've held for all these years is wrong because it lies on this one superstition. The questions that were asked to me in that video from Brian Young were questioning the superstition that Larkin Rose calls the most dangerous superstition. If there's one book I have to recommend to everybody out there right now, and you want to seek the truth and you want to understand things from a holistic point of view, and being that I'm a health coach and I look at things kind of like a practitioner in the world and dealing with the mindset because that's ultimately what creates our reality, this book, The Most Dangerous Superstition, I would say is the most powerful in relation to politics. And if people start to understand what he means by the most dangerous superstition, I think a lot of the problems would actually get solved by the root cause rather than the symptom. Because unfortunately, in politics, a lot of it can be symptom management. when we think it can help us, and we say there's different benefits, but is it actually going to help us in the long run if we're not looking at the root cause? It's like taking a drug to treat a, a a disease, and then that drug causes more problems, and then it's like, oh, now I got to fix that one with another drug. And it's like we're doing that with laws. We create new laws, we put in new
Mhm.
politicians, but what if we're not getting to the root cause?
No,
So
that's absolutely brilliant. And I mean, I grew up, let's face it, in the generations that the life altering moment for me was landing on the moon, and now everybody's talking about maybe that was fake, and also JFK's murder, and now we know
mm,
much different than what we were led to believe back then. So I think that's kind of what you're getting at and what
yes.
you're talking about. So I wrote down a few notes here because I mean, God, we could go on forever. By the way, congratulations on getting on Mike Adams, the Health Rangers show. You didn't by any chance get to talk about Cheerios, did you? My favorite breakfast cereal.
I didn't mention that. No, not in the interview, but yeah, I mean Kellogg's and all them. There's a bunch of stuff that happens in that industry, and I think a lot of people know about it. A lot of people know about the corruption in the food industry, but again, are we getting to the root cause? What if these governments are supporting these big pharma companies? What if they are working together? And we find out they are. So when I
Yes.
was going into the health field, I was inevitably running into, wait, I'm not covered by insurance. These people
Mhm.
are covered by insurance. So now my services are not going to be as valuable. Oh, wait, natural medicine can't be patented. So you can't make money off of it. Oh, wait, here's a
Convenient.
doctor who can't use a certain medicine because the government says that they can't use it. So, and I run into this constantly. It's like, how could you not get into politics and realize that freedom is a greater like remedy to the disease that is our world than any remedy that we can give somebody?
Well,
Freedom.
sure. It's called critical thinking, and you got your generation's biggest share of it. It looks like, but what your generation is? What's your generation? X, Z?
I don't
What?
know what my generation is. I don't think they
Oh,
know
okay.
what they are themselves.
There's always a name. Yeah, you're right. As soon as you call them that, you get sued anyway. So, um, but yeah, for it, I honestly feel so bad for the generation that my generation has left behind.
Mm,
Because what a nightmare, what a mess to clean up. And you are one of the very few in your age group. 23 is just amazing that you've gone through. And when I start sharing some of your websites with the audience, they're going to be like, I could not do that in a lifetime, Cory. My hat's off to you, honestly. So now the first time that I met you was at a conservative group, though.
yes.
And but it was more like I think it was the Vet Goff's group, wasn't it? The MAFA group, Make America
Yep.
Free Again.
Yeah, it was a Christmas party.
And oh, okay. So I mean, she does a lot of phenomenal work in the health field, and so that
Yeah.
would make sense that you were there. And I'm curious because you spoke to me that night, and I really wanted to flush this out on some of the work that you're doing regarding like growing your own crops
Sure.
and getting land. What is that whole plan about?
Yeah, I have a playlist dedicated to this for anybody in Florida on my channel that says it's like Freedom Land Project, basically. And I'm going to update people every step of the way and be completely transparent with it. But essentially, we're looking to get land around the Tampa area, about maybe 10 acres. We can work with less, to be fair, because a food forest is highly concentrated. In a small area. The great thing about permaculture and food forest is you're working with the natural environment to provide the most yield in the smallest amount of land with the least amount of effort. So we're not like looking to be farmers, even though I did actually help out with some farms up north in Pennsylvania. It is basically the future. Permaculture, I mean, you could probably say it's the past. Like our ancestors were probably using some of these practices and they have just kind of been lost or suppressed. But permaculture is essentially, if you think of the forest and nature, how they regenerate and keep themselves alive, trees fall and then new ones revive themselves. It's basically that same principle. You build the soil, like for instance, in Galt's Landing, they have 50 acres. They built a food forest on sand and they
Mm.
got full yield within 1 to 2 years. Most gardeners would say that's impossible. But they said, yeah, it's possible because we worked with nature and we made it happen. And if anything, they're helping the environment. They invited a bunch of bees, and now you have like, butterflies, and then they have like grazing animals, and that provides fertilizer. And then they use copper wire for electroculture. And soon they're going to be developing pool systems using colloidal silver, chemical free,
Mhm.
amazing stuff. And this is what we can do. Absolutely. We know it's possible. So why aren't we doing it? And that's the thing. So we're creating a demonstration to the world, and that's what I want to create. I'm not creating like a neighborhood or a community. Some people think that's maybe what I'm trying to create. I'm creating a demonstration spot for my generation to invite them to say, hey, look at
Mhm.
what's possible. Look at what you haven't been taught. And now you can be inspired and no longer have your depression and anxiety. Because when I was in high school, I was helping a bunch of kids in my own generation with depression and anxiety just by talking with them, just by being there with them. I'm like, where are your parents? Well, what's happening? Why do you feel that way? I don't know. It's because you have all these different things bombarding them constantly in their day-to-day life. You can't, like, I would expect my generation to be quite confused. I was quite confused myself, right? And so seeing nature and having a connection to it and seeing what has been lost will definitely help us reconnect with what has been lost.
No, I
And
totally love it, and
yeah,
maybe you're the right person to ask this question that is baffling me,
sure.
for months now. Why is, Bill Gates burying trees?
Yeah, Bill Gates is buying up all the farmland too.
Well, no,
And
he's burying in the ground. He's cutting the trees down and burying them in the ground. Have you heard this?
no, I don't
Oh,
know.
yeah. You'll have to Google that one. But I mean, it's all about destruction. And what concerns me, because in reading a lot of your stuff,
Sure.
I love your stuff. And believe it or not, when I was your age, I was very much into this too, and have never lost my direct tie to the spiritual,
Mhm.
natural, um, uh, way that we are really supposed to be living, the God-given kind of structure. But the weird thing is that now I where aren't you worried you could build all this stuff, because the people I'm trying to wake up are people that I'm trying to wake up in order to take action against the evildoers as I see them now in
Yes.
your world. From what I've gathered, now correct me if I'm wrong, but the evildoers, there is a way to exist without letting them come into your sphere. That's kind of what I've gathered. But at the same time, the people that I think need to be awakened are people that get rid of those evildoers before they even have a chance to come into our sphere. So talk to me a little bit about
Sure.
where I'm wrong there, or right.
Yeah. So I want to bring Daniel Arnold into that kind of idea, right? Because he is somebody who was in that system and he left it as an order follower, he said. And he
I did
says,
a show with him,
yes,
and so folks, if you want to look for that, I think it was within the past month.
yeah,
Go to the yeah.
ex-cop, over 30
Hmm.
years, a lot of experience. And, he wrote books about it too. And it's amazing. I didn't expect to come across him in 2022. I did an interview for the summit as well with him. And his main message is stop being order followers.
Hmm.
Now, what does that mean? Because this kind of answers your question. Okay. Order following is when you suppress your conscience. You do not think for yourself what to do. You're doing it because someone else tells you to do it, but because they are an authority figure. And that belief in authority is statism, which is the focus of my work. It's the thing that got me questioning my own belief system, those questions that Brian Young, High Impact Flicks brought up. And it's the
Hmm.
thing that most conservatives have probably never even heard of, most libertarians don't know about as well. And it is very much right now not known. It's known by people who call themselves voluntarists. So technically, I'd be considered one of them. Voluntarism is the idea that you don't need politics to achieve a free world because you understand the morality and the psychology is the most important, but also that generally speaking, you want a voluntary free world. Okay. Every interaction between people should be consensual, based on consent, based on voluntary interaction. So that's what the word actually means. And you can look up people like Lysander Spooner, who is not taught in our history books. people. He was a lawyer who fought against the system, who set up his own post office, who was shut down by the U.S. Postal Service because they want to have a monopoly. People like him I consider to be true American heroes that we're not taught about in
And
school.
see, I've never even heard of him, but that also is gonna put this in the back of your mind because I'm gonna wanna ask you this too.
Hmm.
Is it after you set up all this stuff, what's to stop the government from
Right.
coming in and shutting you down?
Exactly.
So
Yeah. So what I'm creating, I have no intent of it being like this is going to replace the system and nobody's going to mess with us. Oh, I'm expecting people to mess with us, but that's how we win.
Mhm.
See, you, it's kind of like what Gandhi said: first they laugh at you, and then you win, type of thing. You, when Trump got attacked in 2016, it only made him stronger.
Mhm.
And so a lot of that stuff in 2016 still teaches me now about his stage presence, why he was able to captivate so many people, including myself. And politics is notoriously known for using strategies, symbolism, and language to get people on their side. And he's a businessman, so I think,
Linsky's tactics,
yeah,
which is what my
yeah.
book is based on. Yeah, absolutely.
And some people it comes natural to them, but politicians are also trained to speak certain ways and be not so much authentic in themselves, but to say what the people want to hear. And
Mhm.
so there's a lot of things happening psychologically that people do not see. A lot of dishonesty, people not saying things as they are. For instance, in taxation, it's taking somebody's money that belongs to them.
Yes.
And Daniel Arnold, I heard him say that in his interview with you. I watched some of it because I was like, Dan, good job, man. And I wanted to support him. And that's when I checked out your channel too. It was really nice. And
Yeah,
I
he
was,
generated a lot of interest.
yeah, I'm sure. And again, he's also a voluntarist, and it's weird for somebody like him to just totally leave the system, right? Somebody who is in that system and just say, "I'm totally done with the whole system." It's not even like we need to reform it; we need to
Mhm.
just get rid of it. But how do we do that? So this process, this is why I call myself an abolitionist. I study one of my main works is studying the abolitionists from the 1800s, Lysander Spooner being one of them, William
Mhm.
Lloyd Garrison being another. For any of you Christians out there, William Lloyd Garrison should probably be somebody you should champion in history because he was the Christian who really fought for his values, and that's how he ended slavery. He was basically
What
the
was his
main
name? William Lloyd who?
William Lloyd Garrison.
Garrison, okay,
And
uh-huh.
PBS even did a documentary on him, and it's actually amazing. And they talk about, even at the end of the documentary, they're like, Garrison was fighting slavery, and even when the Civil War ended chattel slavery, he felt like slavery was still not ended. Like they left us on a cliffhanger. I'm like, this deserves an explanation. I'm
Oh,
like,
by the way, did you it's big in the news right now that slavery has made a huge resurgence over in it's not Africa, but I'm thinking the Islamic countries. I can't remember honestly, but they showed there was a video that went viral showing little children in bags, like big
mhm,
laundry bags, and they open up the bags and they reveal the child and they make them stand up, and these are kids that are being sold for $400. This is
jeez,
just incredibly sad, but yeah,
yeah,
it hasn't gone away.
no.
We even with the child trafficking and all that stuff, that's slavery, folks.
Well,
So
Lysander Spooner was very outspoken. He says this war is just to make the government look good in the people's eyes of saying, oh, look, we ended chattel slavery, meanwhile subjecting them to other forms of slavery, like through
right,
taxation,
like
which they
yes.
introduced right after the Civil War. And he's like, if a man is subjected to a government that he does not want, he's still a slave. And this is a lawyer saying this in the 1800s. And so that
Mhm.
should amaze people. And he also wrote something called No Treason, the Constitution of No Authority. So, for all you people who really love the Constitution out there, here's a lawyer who's proving through the law and natural law, through morality's point of view as well, you never consented to the Constitution. It's just a piece of paper. And the funny thing is, he was the one actually promoting the Constitution as a means to say it's anti slavery when he was fighting chattel slavery. So he used the Constitution for the lawyers at the time to say, hey, this is why we should end slavery. But then at the end, he's like, well, the Constitution is just a piece of paper, and therefore it's not really legitimately binding upon anybody. It doesn't actually have real like consent. It's not a contract that you personally signed. And so it's funny because he really looked at things like that. And
But
he
what
ended
I
up
mean,
agreeing with Garrison.
from studying this stuff, what would you say then regarding somebody who would ask, well, what about the Constitution? Because we've lost it.
Mhm.
Now we have lost the rule of law. I mean, going through some of these J6 trials, there's no doubt in my mind we have no rule of law anymore. They're not
Yeah.
following the Constitution at all.
Right.
And so, what's the better system? What I mean is, so was the Constitution good after all? And we need to get back to it, or because to me, it does follow a lot of natural law.
Yes.
The document.
Oh, absolutely. The founding fathers were very much influenced by people like John Locke and others who were talking about natural law at the time. The problem is that the Constitution was basically a closed door agreement. I did a video on this, and people like Henry Ford were warning others, saying, hey, if you pass this, the government's going to get stronger, not weaker. You say you want this to limit government, it's going to do the exact opposite. He was censored along with many other anti federalists at the time. Censorship existed back then just as much as
Yes,
it did now. And people don't realize that
right.
history is just repeating itself over and over and over again. You know who also had constitutions that were also constitutional republics? Weimar Republic in Germany.
Oh boy, we
And
know how
many
that
other
ended.
of those countries that turned into
Mhm.
some of the worst tyrannies in history, which, by the way, contribute to the number one cause of unnatural death, which is democide. So, if the next person that says, hey, well, Cory, your freedom is dangerous and we need to have our peaceful slavery, as Thomas Jefferson would say, uh,
Mhm.
and because government, we need this for order. Well, government causes the most death in history, and people have done the math on this. People like Professor Rummel, and there's many others. I actually have War in Islam, is War and Peace. These are different books, and they all talk about the numbers, over 500 million in just like the 20th century alone, and that's
Well,
just from what's accountable, and
and the
that's called
uh-huh.
democide.
Yeah, yeah, and the left is very fond of saying, "Never let a good crisis go to waste," even if you have to manufacture it
Mm.
yourselves. I mean, that's how they do
The Hegelian
manufacture the
dialectic.
crisis. Yeah, right. Exact. I actually use that term and define it in my book. Um, so we're getting down to the last 5 minutes.
Sure.
I want to you to explain, and I'm going to pull up your website, the first one that you gave me here, so that you can tell people, because what is your answer and how would you let people know?
Yes. So I have this very laid out very simply for people on the liberator.us. There's a learn page and an action page. I did that on purpose because I think, to be honest with you, most independent media should have a page where it's like, hey, you want to do something? This is where you can do it. Because constantly I look at places like Natural News and I criticize them. I'm like, hey, all your audience is like, I want to do something. What's the action? How do we change this tyranny? And they don't really get an answer from independent media. Independent media is constantly putting them in
Mhm.
fear, like the world's going to end every moment, and World War III is just around the corner every moment, and there's a zombie apocalypse. And I agree with them, to a
Yeah.
great extent. But the problem is, where's the solution? So
Mhm.
that page called abolition. See, there's slavery and abolition. Those are buttons. One of them says learn, and the other one says action. Learn, very basic. That's the root cause problem that you get to learn about. Abolition, the root cause solution. And it is
Let
based
me
on the
pull one up. Should
abolitionist
I
work.
pull up
Sure.
abolition here?
You could do slavery. They both link to each other.
Okay.
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
See the root cause solution. Okay. And I have a video version of it as well. And then I even show what the abolitionists did, giving their own timelines and experience, because you have to understand these are people who did not use politics to change the hearts and minds of people. They saw that. They said you can't change the hearts and minds of people by writing it down and making slavery illegal. You had to convince the populace. And a lot of people did not like that idea. They're like, what do you mean? You can't have change without politics, and politics is necessary. And they're like, no, these were very
Mhm.
religious people. And they're like, we need to understand our relationship to God. We need to recognize God's government is above that of man. And that's why man should not serve another man. Okay, so abolitionists were called immediatists also because they said, let's end it now. Let's not be gradual, meaning let's make it better over time. Because if you were to put a slave on a different plantation or give them a new master, you can say, well, their condition's getting better. Eventually, they'll just have no slavery. But wrong. Slavery is always wrong. And if you make it look less
Mhm.
like slavery, it actually makes it more dangerous because the slave can't tell that they're a slave. And that's exactly
Yeah.
where we are now. If we had a limited government, a constitutional republic, that's why they're created, because they are meant to deceive people into thinking that they are free, just as much as a democracy deceives people into thinking, well, I have a vote and the majority can just tell the minority what to do, what to think, how to act, how to live their own lives. It's still slavery. It's been that principle since Sumeria 6,000 years ago, where kings thought they had a divine right to rule by God, and therefore everybody else was subject to them. And the slave even had to work for their freedom by something called manumission or enfranchisement, where the master would then say, you are now free because you worked for it, because we get to grant it to you. Can somebody grant your freedom? Can someone grant your self-ownership? Or is self-ownership and freedom something you have to attain, something that you have to self-discipline yourself into attaining? And that's why voluntarism is the only philosophy, as far as I'm concerned, or self-ownership, whatever you want to call it. The simple practice of freedom itself is what's needed for freedom. It makes sense. But going through these complex political rituals are not going to get us anywhere. If anything, it's going to cause more division with our fellow man. And so I'm trying to unite people around these basics, the golden rule, what Daniel Arnold calls objective morality or natural law. Mark Passio talks about that, right? Larkin Rose talks about
Mhm.
these concepts, but you don't even need to believe in objective morality or natural law to understand this. You just need to understand that whatever you think, don't impose it on others. Whatever you think, it doesn't matter what it is. Don't say that that's the way the world should work and therefore violence is legitimate. Because authority and the belief in statism is precisely the exemption in morality, the permission for people to do bad things. The difference between a criminal and somebody in office is the criminal does a wrong action and everybody perceives them as wrong. If an authority does a wrong action, people perceive it as sometimes right, if not necessary and moral for society, even though it's the same exact action. And then they cloak the action, like I said, taxation, by saying it's taxation rather than theft. Everything now appears to people like it's perfectly fine.
You know what, Corey, you're exactly right. And that narrative, the left understands how to use the narrative in the way to kind of indoctrinate everybody to just follow whatever they're saying is the right way to believe. We got to shut things down here,
Yes,
Corey. But I mean, you
the right does it too.
doing a half an hour show on you does not do you justice. That's for sure. But tell
Thank
us
you,
what we're
Kat.
looking at right now here.
This is
Your
a
other.
website I created, just very simple. This is a standstill website. I recommend the other one, the liberator.us, for people. But this is a movement that if you wanted something to help bring the message to more people, I figured to create it as a way to say, hey, here's a flag, here's a simple like little sticker that you can put on your cards, like
Okay.
on your car or on your lawn, like instead of political signs that would be universal and timeless, that would help share a simple message that can last through the generations, that would remind people of who they are, because we're losing a sense of who we are as we move into the future. So that's what that's for, is to keep that simple message of nature. Okay. But
Why don't you take these last few minutes here and share with people how what they can do, how they can get in touch with you as quickly as you
yes,
can, because we're running out of time.
yeah. The liberator.us/abolitionism is that action page. And
Mhm.
I list a bunch of different strategies that people can learn, including permaculture and growing their own food, because that's very important. And I know that that is a
Mhm.
great strategy toward waking other people up. Actually, I've noticed where people walk into a food forest and they're like, wow, and then their mind opens up. So you want to help people reach those aha moments where they recognize who they are and who they're meant to be, as I mentioned in the beginning of this. And encouraging and planting the seed is important. Knowing how to talk to people. Larkin Rose has a seminar called Candles in the Dark, where he specifically teaches people how to talk to others in such a way that basically you're just asking questions using the Socratic method to help them come to their own conclusions. Because
Yeah,
us in the truth community, yeah,
I
we,
wish
we,
I
we want
was
to tell
better
people. Yeah, we
at
want to
that.
tell people like, hey, you're wrong. You're being enslaved. You're being poisoned. But if we say that to someone, they're going to be like, no, that's not true.
Oh,
I'm not.
conspiracy, you
Yeah,
crazy
you're
nut. Yeah.
But if you ask
Yeah.
them questions, they can achieve that on their own just as much as a natural practitioner gives somebody herbs and
Mhm.
plants to help somebody heal themselves on their own. You're doing the same thing. You're working holistically with them. So that's what we have to do. There isn't one answer, there isn't one pill to every ill. We have to be able to look at every individual holistically. As a practitioner, this is what I have to say. But generally speaking, it cannot be done in the political realm because
Wow.
politics is just going to get in the way. And I know this is a very strange thing to say, but it's affirmed by the abolitionists, it's affirmed by voluntarism. And the more you study it, the more you understand statism and this root cause is basically reinforced, if anything, by political methods.
All right. Well said. And you are one amazing young man. My hat's off to you. Thank you so much. If there's anything really earth shattering you'd like to bring us news, please let me know so you can come back on again because there is so much
Sure.
to learn from you.
Well,
Thank you for
I,
every.
I I'll end on this. As I said, limited government can be more dangerous because the slave does not recognize that they are a slave.
Mhm.
Conservatism and libertarianism can be more dangerous than communism and these other forms that we know are outright evils because they deceive people into thinking that they are free or that it's a lesser form of slavery and therefore it's not slavery when it still in reality is. And I can prove
Well,
that to
yeah,
people to
no
the end
kidding.
of earth.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, you do a pretty good job at it. Well, you take really good care of yourself, Corey. I hope to see you
Thank you.
out and about out there again. Thank you
Thank
for
you,
joining
Kathy.
us. Okay. Wow, huh? There's a lot to really unpack there, but go to his website and check around, folks, and share it once again, as well as this podcast here. Folks, thank you so much for joining another episode. And hey, we're booked with guests here. I've got guests lined up through April. So you're not going to want to miss one single episode. They're all very energy packed like this one. So until we see you the next time, God bless you. Take care.